What's popping, everybody? Hey, it's Big Villainous. Welcome to Overthrow Media, Fractured Society, and we about to dive into a second, but I gotta bring on my co-host, Jelly. So say what's up, Jelly.
What's up, everybody? What's up? What's up?
Today we're gonna talk about civility and colonization. You know what I mean? I made all these things, my guy. I just forgot to put it up. Damn it. Um, hold on. Back. Oops, my background. I'm still trying to work these overlays and stuff. Hold on one second. For one. So everybody in comment, let us know how your week has been real quick. And Jelly, why don't you tell us how your week has been? I know you're all anonymous and everything, so details might not get,
dude.
But
I slept in, had a bit of a head cold and shit, still fucking dealing with this shit, so my schnoz is a little bit, but just working and trying to keep my head above the water, pro-life, let's go.
It's always fun. Always fun.
Yep.
Oh. All right, forget it. This is a little extra thing I was making, but I'm not even going to look for them right now. Okay, so I guess the first segment we should talk about is civility and colonization. I think we see civility, right? We see it used, and I was actually seeing one of the creators that I watch. Oh my god, I forget the brother's name right now. With dreadlocks that everybody confused with FD. I forget their name for the life of me. But
I wish I could help. I don't know many streamer names.
I know, I bet. But I mean, some audience might help. I don't know why he doesn't even look like FD. He just has like that's FD. Like that's not FD, man. Like 31J or no, it's not it. Something like that. You know what I mean? And if talking about civility, and I was kind of T1J. Thank you, T1J. Everyone's like, yo, already know. And talking about he mentioned civility, and I was like, yeah. He was talking about how like a lot of left isn't really civil and stuff, and I was like, it doesn't have a lot of not civil, but has a lot of civility. A lot of times, it's very conflictual, and I'm like, yes, and I do agree that there's a lot of ways is unuseful ways. But the thing is, the problem that came to mind real quick, like, and maybe kind of think about this besides a conversation we were having, was who does civility work for, and like what is civility really about? You know what
exactly.
I mean? Does civility work for the average person, or does civility work for the people who already fit the status quo or control the status quo? Kind of that's the first thing I'm starting to think about. You know what I mean? And it also connects to identity politics, but we'll get into that in a little bit. You know what I mean? Because I think that is one form of respectability politics or civility politics, right? And civility, like I said, that doesn't give you free reign also because I'm not PC to be oppressive, because I think that's two separate things that can
exactly.
You feel me? And sometimes people can be uncivil in ways that are oppressive, right? But I also think you can be uncivil in ways that are literally going against people who are oppressing you.
Yeah, because generally most of the forms of oppression in our society, they're legitimized. So these are the ones that are civil. When an eviction happens, the person who like resists getting kicked out into the streets and made homeless, they're the uncivil one. The sheriffs and the local sheriffs or whatever, these different groups, the city workers who are just going to pile all their shit out onto the fucking ground to just get destroyed. That's never talked about as like violent or uncivil. It's very civil because they're following all the procedures, but there's a level of violence there that is being like erased. It's kind of being obfuscated from that conversation because of that civility, because of that legitimization.
And like also one thing I think about when we think about the civility and how it connects to the ruling class, right? Like, and who does civility work for? Civility is something that is supposed to be used among themselves and from people who are lower on the social rungs up to them. And it's not ever the other way around. You don't see billionaires that are completely uncivil to the houseless being checked on civility. You feel me? You don't ever see that ever happen because it's not meant to be used that way. And I think about some of the people who are thought of as civil, and there's a component I want to put on you after I say the JFK thing. people, for example, think of JFK a lot, and that's why I put him on the thumbnail of when talk about civility and like someone who is a good politician, for example. Um, but the problem with that is that he was civil to who? Was he civil to the farmers he was bombing in Cuba? Because I'd argue that he definitely was not. You know what I mean? And I think we got the quick Queen Victoria, which I wanted you to touch on a little bit because you know that history a little bit better than I do. About like that time frame and how she was portrayed versus the realities of like society and how it was operating. You know what I mean? In real life.
Definitely. Yeah, like Queen Victoria, you have the Victorian era in England. It's like one of the most brutal periods in industrial history. Like people were just getting ground up. It was unlivable. You couldn't live there, and it was all maintained off this this veneer of civility. And so it wasn't the problem that like the British Empire was like brutally massacring and committing genocide all over the planet for like their imperial aims. No, it was the uncivil masses that were breaking the social peace. That was the problem. It's civility is always going to be a tool of the powerful because they're the ones who set the rules for that social game. That's never our game because we don't have the power to set those rules. And a lot of us, we're forced to engage in these social roles and these social forms in certain ways for our very survival. Like I'm getting a little bit better at watching the chat, and there was somebody who brought that up in chat, and I think that also needs to be acknowledged. It's like civility is easy for a rich person to just be like, oh yeah, I'm at the top of this. This is how you act. But for those of us closer to the bottom, it's a dangerous situation. It's not as easy as just saying I'm going to be uncivil or this or that. It's like we got to watch how we act in certain situations just to stay safe.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it, and I completely understand those thought processes too because I feel it. I mean, I know, as you may know, I've paid the cost from being a very uncivil to the people. Like,
oh yeah,
networks because a lot of people don't want to like even people who have good intentions don't want to acknowledge how they hold power and how they move, right? But also then makes enemies that really actually come for your head sometimes, especially when we talk about like organizing the activist spaces. How many people came from my neck, not just in like soft assassinations, but the state's interaction with me, which has been very violent, for example, because I return. You throw bows, I throw bows. And it's very much that energy, you know what I mean? I'll be a thorn in your side the whole time, right? But they do have a good point. It does make it more dangerous in some ways. But I also want to like refer when we talk about danger to like UEP Newton talked about the crazy nigga syndrome, right? Where like if you're the crazy nigga, if you're the one that's like wilding out, they don't want to fuck with you. They don't really want to mess with you and push that line with you because they're intimidated, right? He talked about like UEP Newton and Revolutionary Suicide talked a lot about how his dad maneuvered and how they interacted with them because he played the crazy nigga role, right? And that's just being helpful. So I think there is also a component to being a thorn that also gives some degree, I won't say protection, but like it gives incentive to not pick with you. You know what I mean? It gives incentive to not target you in some ways. Where I feel like the middle ground tends to have the hardest. People kind of like walk that line. If you're very uncivil, there is some shielding that gets put there because they know you're going to be a problem to pick it with.
They have to get more cops to deal with the situation. It takes a lot more resources because they're actually like, oh, this motherfucker's a fighter. We're not just going to be able to like use one guy to just walk them out, that kind of shit. But there also comes the consequences of that, in the sense that when they come for you, they're treating you like a fighter. So you have to expect that.
I know some of y'all heard, like, for example, when and I know Judge really familiar with it as well. When they tasered me in the back in court, like because I was being uncivil. That being said, there's consequences, but I will be real. There's consequences in every choice we make, right? So I think I prefer, and maybe it's just because I'm big. I'm also 6'2". I'm heavy as fuck. I'm big, and so maybe that also plays a role in it too. So I'm not going to disacknowledge like my physical attributes that may help with my ability to be uncivil. So I'm not going to dismiss those either. But I think they play a big role. I know I'm gonna be kind of laggy, y'all. We're using Wi-Fi for the video right now, so it's kind of like wilding. But I apologize for that. But the vocals will not be leggy because it's not, moving the same way. But yeah, no, I think civility has a cost though. I think civility is a way we can utilize to survive at the cost of our liberation, of our freedom, and we kind of submit and we trade off some things with that civility that we're required to have. But also, it's like I want to emphasize it's not made to benefit us that are actually oppressed. It is not made to benefit us at all. Oh. Yeah. I don't know if you feel me on that or not, Jelly.
What? It's not.
That it's not made to benefit us.
Oh yeah, no, of course.
It's completely set up to like uphold the status quo, and
Mm-hmm.
and that means us at the bottom and certain people at the top. That means the lawyers at the top, the doctors at the top. You know what I mean? And that's not even the top. That's just like the average. That's what we would generally deal with in our reality, because we're not seeing a billionaire in our reality. Usually.
Yeah,
We're not seeing the super powerful, but those things are always. It's like built like a pyramid. It's always meant to suck up energy through up into the higher rungs, the higher bricks. And especially if you really don't have much and you're at the bottom and you're like, barely getting by and having to worry about daily survival, it's not meant to benefit us at all. And it doesn't. You know what I mean? It makes us. It's the same thing that makes us give away our power to our bosses and authorities around us. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it's it reminds me of like I don't want to get distracted onto like discussions about abolition or anything, but it reminds me of the social workers that people are always, we gotta no cops, only social workers kind of shit. And I always come back to like the early 1900s when the social working profession was invented by the middle class, by the bourgeois, to impart bourgeois values on the young poor kids in the tenements, to like hate the cramped kid, or to hate like living together in like larger, like more communal settings, things like viewing the cleanliness of a place not as like a reflection of how shitty the landlord is, but it's a personal failing on you, all these different types of things. And one of the major things was trying to impart this idea of civility in the teeming masses in those tenements, and that was what their job was as social workers. They were there to perpetuate that model onto the lower classes. And so like I think that we always have to be aware of like civility is never pushed on us in one way. They got the velvet glove that covers their iron fist. They're like, here's a social worker. But ultimately, that velvet glove can come off, and that iron fist is still shown to be real fucking heavy, And that's when they come out with the police, the military, all those things to use violence to enforce it. But I think we have to look at the whole range of systems that are designed to teach, the lower classes these types of processing, like these types of principles and belief structures, and in what way are they successful at doing this? Because like if we want to change the situation, we have to look at what they've been successful at, so we know how to counter those tactics of theirs. And part of it is they were very successful at using those types of like social workers and like the help to the poor, we're giving to the poor, as a means of proselytizing. A little bit of a tongue twister there. They were effectively the missionaries of that capitalist system. And so there were some successes there, but like how we have to look at those successes to figure out how can we counter them, Yeah.
And also, I saw this from Athelius. Being black means people automatically viewing you as uncivil. Civility and respectability is a scam, and it was 100% fact. And not only that, but they structured it around European social structures, right? So we see even like when we talk about black folks, we see black folks that assimilate to that and then become like accessories in that problem of white supremacy, right? Because the civility situations, and we see that being like what we consider civil based off what it benefits the Europeans, what benefits the current white supremacist social structures. And so that's the expectation that's put upon like black folks, indigenous folks, and everybody else, especially black folks, because they really want us to just go along and be the downtrodden. They want us to play that role in society, especially if we're proletariat, especially if we're lumpen proletariat.
Mhm.
So like that's something they want to say. And if people don't know what lumpen proletariat is, it means the criminalized working class, if that makes any type of sense to people. Like or the underclass or whatever you want to call it. So
those that are like effectively trapped within that class layer because of criminalization and other forms of like things like that. Like mental health can also effectively put people into that underclass, permanent underclass, because they're more likely to like get into shit, small scale shit. You know, they fucking get criminalized. You start doing, and you know, sooner and later, boom, there's like no place that'll hire. You are effectively trapped in that class layer forever.
It forces us to seem as non-threatening and agreeable as possible when we are the ones being threatened, and 100% exactly what it is.
Yep.
And like not only that, but they want to destroy our ways of communicating, our ways of thinking. And I think it's really important to recognize that, because what they do is like they try to dictate what we think is right, what we think is wrong, based off of their mindsets. And we see a lot of that when it comes to identity politics, right? And how it's being addressed into a very like churchy way instead of a way of like being able to build empathy and relation. It's become very much like church doctrine almost, if that makes type of sense. And it kind of like runs those movements and those not even the movements, but the purposes of those analysis into the ground, because we focus so much on what is end up being civility politics instead of like how do we actually break down the barriers that exist that uphold the status quo, which also makes sure that people have to be at the bottom and be the underclass so that they can maintain their capital, their wealth, if they are a little more bourgeoisie or petite bourgeoisie, right? And I think one of those things is we got to really comprehend that, is because we see that in our workforces, we see that in our schools, we see that in the idea that we're supposed to go to a academic institution in the first place, even, right? Those type of mentalities, because it's a way to push us into what makes us civil, right? And I think they said about civility and civilization, and or being civilized or being uncivilized, right? And so that's all part of it. That's where we go into the academia side of it, and how that a lot of that plays into it too. It's like if you think about who is academics or who is accepted academics, for example, you've seen the people who are seen as more civil and more civilized, and that those play a big role as well as the way we communicate. Because one thing, I'm trying to remember the fool's name right now. This dude, there was a dude that basically was talking about academia in India specifically, but his thought theory got used across the globe in colonization, and it was about making people move and think like the Europeans, hold the culture of the Europeans, hold the standards of conduct of the Europeans, and think that those ways of thinking are the correct ways. And I think that's when we get into like also other ways that civility politics show up, especially like in things like identity politics. Not that oppression isn't real, no, it absolutely is, but the way we choose to address it and the way we like cover up the evils that are being done by like having polite ways of thinking, when I think it's honestly more polite if we have honest ways of thinking, if we're transparent about where we stand on things, in my opinion. But that's just me.
Yeah, I would say that like really like academia plays a very important role in the legitimization of those forms of knowledge, so that like it's that process, that colonial process of delegitimizing other forms of knowledge and only prioritizing those within that imperial form of life. And you know, like, not going to say that there haven't been academics that have written really good stuff and have taken part in, you know, but that is like a prerequisite role of that process. Like it is the legitimization of knowledge and like creating the framework with which to control knowledge creation, and so like, yeah, like I would say the use of civility is like kind of like the soft power side of the police state, in that it's what's taught to young people from a very early age to try it from this imperial mode, this imperial society, to kind of preclude the chances that we might even act in another way or see another way as like even real or possible. If this imperial society can control knowledge to such a degree through these modes of like civility and like who gets to share knowledge, who is the legitimate holder of knowledge, all of these things, they're able to kind of like foreclose a lot of options. Because I know BP over here is going to agree with me on this one, but like every fucking uprising, every time there's a big the next thing, there's always a bunch of people recreating the wheel, and they have to break that kind of shit in their head. And there's all these things that they're afraid of other people doing, because they think that it somehow is like counterproductive, when in fact those things are the things that actually, a lot of those things that those liberals and those kind of more civil minded, like I don't want to say cowards, because many of them are like, they just need to see that like, oh shit, those material actions that we can take, creating networks of people working towards our own goals, those actually have a much more direct material effect on our lives than maintaining these civil conversations, so that in 2 years when the election comes up, a couple more undecided voters, that mythical unicorn, will like choose their side or not. And it's all just bullshit. It's all just a distraction, when ultimately it's just trying to stop people from taking those steps to take actual action, direct action. And that doesn't mean just like, oh, violence or anything. It means like just directly going towards your goal, directly working towards your goal, and not worrying about the mediators, not worrying about the politicians or the media or any of these other people that are like these institutions whose only role is to mediate. This group is doing something, and this is how we legitimize that or delegitimize that and say that they're the bad ones, And ultimately, so civility is all wrapped up in that process.
That's how you get people trying to like funny string us so the police will arrest us. So that actually happened. You remember that? Man, back in the days.
I do. Yeah, that was bullshit. I remember that shit. God.
So, but the thing is, the civility, the same thing that upholds civility is the same reason people love civility, the same reason people hate revolutionaries, right? And I mean hate. I'm not talking about just the state hating them, right? We'll see like liberals or people who are supposed to be progressive or supposedly are radical hate revolutionaries because it doesn't allow them to continue to move comfortably within the system that exists right now. It doesn't continue to allow them to like revolutionaries don't continue to allow them to maneuver in a way where they can keep their lives the way they are. That change has to come for there to actually be change, which blows people's minds. But and when we think about civility, it keeps people from making that change, creating that uncomfortability that is necessary. Because one thing you'll learn, like especially in organizing, especially in revolutionary organizing, you're going to make everybody upset and uncomfortable because a lot of their creature comforts are based on the oppressive system itself. And so that's also why they want civility, is to maintain these structures instead of tear them down. And we see it right now with everybody, voting matters. People are saying that right now. I'm not going deep. I'm not going too deep, but people are saying that right now because they want to be able to imagine making a change that is substantial without having to actually make a change, right? Without having to, they want to wish it into existence. And I always say with that stuff is like, it's like Einstein said or whatever, that doing the same thing over and over again, expecting results, and also that you can't tear down the master's house with the master's tools. But that's also structures of civility in some ways, because you're choosing to cast a ballot within the already existing structure and to participate in that instead of being uncivil, instead of being like, no, we're gonna go tear stuff up, shut stuff down until we are free, ideally, but or until at least we get what the fuck we want, right? And one thing I will say is the power of fuck you, right? The power of fuck you is way stronger than you think, right? Right now, in this state, not to like, talk about, but that case, remember I got tasered? That case went to the Supreme Court, and right now in that state, because of that case, they have to show cause to dismiss black people off, or any minority people off the jury. The last person in a case is trying, when not a black person or a brown person or whatever, to dismiss them. But before that, they could just do it, right? And so you wouldn't get a jury of peers. But you know where that came from? Not voting, from me saying "fuck you," getting tasered in the back, running all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yep.
And it is not just me. I'm not trying to use me, but generally, when we see change come, it comes from that energy, that fuck you, no. And it's like, we'll shut stuff down. We'll come to you where you're trying to pass money in city council. Like I remember when we blocked the most expensive proposed police facility in U.S. history, got stopped right here in Washington. Yes, even more expensive than Cop City. It was a $140 million project, because we were like, no, fuck no, and we won't stop coming to your meetings. We won't stop shutting down all your projects until you cancel the project. You know what they did? They canceled that project. You know what I mean? And so like those things came from being uncivil, from not being charitable with them, and being like, no, because at the end you're not listening to us directly in our survival, so we're not going to be polite about it. We're going to take space. You know what made the moments that made MLK powerful is the moments where he took space. The moment made Malcolm X powerful is all the moments he took space. That made the Panthers powers is they took space. They said, "Fuck you, no, we're taking this space." You know what I mean? That's very uncivil, and that's exactly what we need to be free.
Well, it's literally like acting outside of their mediation. It's the reason they convince everyone to be like, oh, you gotta push for social change this way, you gotta protest this way, you gotta act this way, is because they know if we act other ways, then we might get out of control and they won't be able to control the situation anymore. Because ultimately, like you bring up a really good point. Liberals, and progressives, whatever, they're all terrified of the threat that truly a social movement towards the destruction of class society could actually, become. They're terrified of that because they want to put in their little Black Lives Matter sign in their front yard and all that shit. And love means love. And don't get me wrong, those are totally fine, like feelings and sentiments.
Half the time they put the Walmart all lives, like in this house, Black lives, Muslim lives, blah blah blah. Like, bro, stop.
I'm just saying that, but ultimately what it is it's coming from a fear of the destruction of their class privilege, their benefits within this society. They know, oh shit, if something changes, I might be like the people we take advantage of, in these colonial processes, because people are, oh, America's the richest. Well, it depends on what you're talking about. Like, you look at the res, that's like third world conditions fucking, because the U.S. government just fucking doesn't give a shit. And, people are living in really fucking hard straits. It's like,
I mean, look what's been happening in Pine Ridge for ever, bro. Literally using it as a uranium dumping site and shit. It's crazy.
Literally, reservations, indigenous reservations in the United States are declared by the U.S. government, quote unquote, national sacrificial zones. That means anything that's toxic, poisonous, they don't want to drop on white people in the suburbs, they're going to put on the res. And this is a colonial process. And we have to look at how they are able to achieve this process. Well, they have these logistical networks that maintain this process, and enough people don't gum up the gears, so to speak. They want people to hold their little sign and be like, oh, I voted and I'm against this, but I'm not going to do anything about it. They don't want people to actually get in the way. And that doesn't mean you got to be like, oh, everybody's got to throw bricks every time. No, that's stupid shit. Everybody has a part to play. Street medics have a part to play. People who are just doing research for movements, they got a part to play. All these different things. People cooking meals. You can't have an occupation or an encampment without a fucking kitchen, and you gotta respect those folks because they're holding it down. But
get no credit.
and
bro.
getting no credit, dude, for reals. I feel you. But it's like, these are things like, those are directly acting towards goals. You go, okay, there's this problem that we want to get rid of, or there's a thing we want to see in the world. Like, how do we act towards that? Now, that's going to make waves, and that's uncivil, you know? And the liberals may care, but I don't give a shit because I want to destroy class society. This shit sucks. It's bullshit. I hate it. So, like, you know, but ultimately we have to understand that that's just the terrain we're going to walk on. So, you know, in certain spaces we have to move a little bit differently. You know, that's okay. You know, you don't owe anybody like to be some fucking, you know, martyr or some shit. You know, that, you know, we don't need that. But what we do need is people who go, hey, you know what? Like, I can take a step in this direction. I can go towards this goal with some other people, and let's see how far we can push it. And that takes an attack on civility within ourselves, you know?
Man. Yeah, and that definitely, it takes attack on civility, it takes attack on comfortability. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, I mean, the thing is, to be real, like, it's not just civility that's the problem. Civility is one of the foundations of the problem, but it's also people's comfortability. Like, everybody right now wants to be comfortable. For example, they don't want to be uncomfortable. And one of the things I will tell you from years of experience, uncomfortability is a revolutionary's friend, is liberation's friend. Comfortability is oppression's friend, because like, oppression's whole goal is to keep you comfortable enough to keep consenting to your own oppression. That is literally its goal, is just to give you just enough so that they can scrape off everything off the top and just give you just enough crumbs that you won't fight back. And I mean, even when we talk about, like, people talk about FDR all the fucking time, right? But FDR's whole point was to give you enough crumbs that you didn't revolt. It wasn't because they cared about you. It wasn't because he was a good dude. It was because he knew that if they kept going the direction they're going, the direction we're going now, that revolt was inevitable, and they might not make it through that revolt.
Yep.
So
his fucking name was Roosevelt. Yeah.
Made them look out for the people, but it wasn't looking out for people. It was looking out for themselves, because if they're looking out for the people, we'd be doing a lot better even now than we're doing.
Yep.
So,
definitely.
I mean, I know you want to throw some during the FDR name. I know you got that. I know you got that down too.
I'm just saying, motherfucker is part of the Roosevelt family. Those motherfuckers are like one of the fucking, you know, aristocratic families of the United States. Like, those dudes were not, you know, FDR was not coming up with Social Security and all that shit out of the benefit of the masses. You know, he literally, in the 30s, they were like, there was a contest between the bourgeoisie in America because of how violent the U.S. labor struggle was getting. You know, you had open armed conflict over strikes and shit. And FDR pretty much was like, no, if we don't do something to, like, centralize more power within the federal government, to not only create certain welfare programs, but work programs, they were like, we're going to have a revolution. You know, and they were like, we need more bread and circuses for the people, or else they're going to fucking revolt. And ultimately he won out and saved the American empire for at least up to now. While we're
Oh, keep going. My bad. I was laughing.
I was kind of trailing off, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, till now is a key word, because it's falling apart quickly. I think one thing I want to touch on, and I think it was the second segment we're kind of moving into right now, which was identity politics. Does it really work, and is it not just civility politics rebranded?
Mm-hmm.
And I will say one thing is, I think the lines of civility, I think definitely it is civility politics rebranded. I think the lines of it, what made it really complicated is it came across way more. It took pieces of dialectics and then recuperated it in the way that it could, right?
Yeah.
And I think I always said it was like bad liberal dialectics, right? It's not very good analysis. It's really shallow. I think that's one big problem. Is really shallow. We focus on, like, vain, shallow things. For example, like what people say, and we don't acknowledge that plays to class benefits. That plays to people who have more power, who already conduct themselves certain ways to seem professional or whatever else, you know what I mean, or professional in academia, so they can jump through hoops. And it also doesn't address the behaviors of people, which also is way more telling, right? Because there are plenty of PC people, people who are super PC who are gentrifying my neighborhood right now. In fact, it's almost all PC people gentrifying my neighborhood or
Yep.
gentrified. Actually, not even gentrifying because my whole neighborhood pushed out, right? And that's a lot of places in the country. And now it's not. I'm not going to say about the South. The South is a little more complicated, but even that has some truth to it. Even there, right? You can see those trends even there, just not as deep. But the thing is, that doesn't mean that people can be bigoted. Doesn't mean that like we gotta tolerate that type of shit. Because you know what I mean, just because I wasn't PC about racism, I mean I'm not gonna still put hands on you for calling me a nigger, right? Like that's not what it means. You know what I mean? I think people make it like because of this right left, which is really right. To be real, the conversation is both right wing. It's on the right side of the pocket. You know what I mean? They try to make it to be this more these two different sides versus like there's all these other perspectives that don't get acknowledged because it's not one or the other, right? It's not like either PC like culture and identity politics or just being a church mouse, in other words, or being a complete piece of shit white supremacist transphobe. Like it's not one, there's not these two sides to be on, right? It's and I think it makes a false auspice of it. But I think that also really plays into it. And I think also has been really weaponized to divide people who would otherwise work through their shit together and figure out how to like actually learn from each other and be more empathetic. Instead, it becomes more of a battleground. And I think it's the way it's handled because I think a lot of the critiques in spirit are great, but a lot of how they're handled and utilized by what we see now to make the liberal Idpol thing is very detrimental. You know what I mean? It's very destructive and it doesn't actually get to the goals we say we're chasing. It doesn't mean tolerate bigotry. It doesn't mean you just put up with anything. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I think there's definitely a line that's a lot more effective than the ones that are being taken, because the ones that are being taken tend to only benefit academics and people who already communicate in specific ways. That I said reminds me of church, reminds me of civility politics, reminds me of how the elite would navigate around themselves because it's all about image. It's all about the way it looks versus actually caring or having empathy towards the people that are oppressed, right? And I think that's a big problem.
It's about maintaining a social ritual rather than actually looking at like material interests that we might either share or have in conflict with each other. You know, it tries to flatten this class society by, you know, like the term political correctness actually comes from like I think the 60s, 70s, and it was used by the new left, kind of tongue in cheek. Like, oh, that's not politically correct, comrade. You know, they were making fun of like the authoritarian socialist states. You know, it was like tongue in cheek. But into the 80s, you start seeing actually starting to get used by like think tanks, liberal think tanks, where they start looking at this as like a method to like, well, it's like, look at it this way. A rich person isn't like they're being classic to a poor person. It's not that class society enables them to exploit the labor of a poor person. It's that they're being individually classist maybe in how they talk to that person. Well, even if you like police everyone's language to the point where no one says any microaggressions ever, the problem is if you don't deal with those underlying structural causes that gave rise to those microaggressions in the first place, whole new microaggressions will just come out of the fucking woodwork because you're not dealing with the underlying like systemic power inequalities in that class society and how those classes are dispersed, you know. And I'm not just trying to boil it all down to economic class either. I look at race, gender, sex, all of these things in like a class, using a class analysis, because that is not how I view it myself. In the sense, it's how we are put into a class. We are reduced to that in class society. And how do we break through those methods of being forced into subjecthood within these classes? But ultimately, we can't start doing that unless we look at Idpol and as one of the tools of this system where it's trying to distract us with all these petty little fucking, arguments about what the right form of jargon is. And again, I'm not saying you should go out there and be a bigot. That's like, I'm probably, if you be a bigot around me, I'll probably smack you in the mouth or some shit. But like, that doesn't mean that I think that we're going to achieve social change by policing language. I just don't think that, because I know that BP can back me up on this. When I look back at social movements, actually being in part of social, like political, scenes and projects, some of the people that were the most policey of other people's language, the middle class academics, and they were trying to kick poor people out of these movements because, like, a poor, person from the hood or something is like using like the term, like, the B word or whatever for black. It's like, come on, man, like. Am I going to say that word? Maybe not, whatever. But like, the idea that like a bunch of like middle class academics are going to be the ones determining who is a part of social movement based upon criteria solely on like what is acceptable language and jargon and social ritual within that circle. It's just a losing game.
And also there's this component too of like, especially when we talk about the class layers, like, let's say, let's stick with I'm gonna stick within black folks just for a second, like black academics and black professionals versus black proletariat versus black lumpen. We all speak fucking different languages for real. Like, we speak English, but the context is different. Things mean different things. You know what I mean? For each one of those class, right? And it'd be the same word would mean extremely different things. And people don't want to consider that because they don't want to consider that their way isn't just necessarily the right way, but just a different way. And then trying to understand other people's ways and understand what different levels of respect is. Because one of the things is, like, people who are academics and professionals like to try to dictate what respect is, but they can't walk in the hood, bro. They can't, because, and it's not because you have money. Much as they want to say that, it's because of the way you don't show respect.
Well, but they're better than. They got their nose fucking up in the air, and they think they're better than everybody else. So yeah, you're gonna
that, but like, just they're not understanding the customs of respect. So the thing is, I think one of the things is trying to understand and be respectful of the mutual expectations and where there isn't mutual and where we just are different, right? But understanding each other is crucial to that. But what we have now, like around civility, actually is the most uncivil shit you would say by what people usually think of civil meaning, right? It's like it's not even seeking understanding. And that's where I do agree with T1J. Like, as much as I say it's a civility, like, I'm not gonna be nice to somebody I don't fuck with. I'm just not gonna do it. You know what I mean? I might be silent, I might hold my tongue, but be nice is not the one. I'm not gonna do that. You know what I mean? And it's just those things are like, but like, I might disagree with them on that level, but on another level of like seeking understanding and communication being forefront for me is crucial, because that is the pieces. And and trust me, I've got a little jaded sometimes, made it harder for me to do this. But those are the pieces that have been most successful organizing, most successful making positive change in the community. It hasn't been checking people on every stupid thing they say. You know what I mean? It hasn't, because one thing I always think about is, what type of society do I want to live into? And I don't want to live anywhere where I got to walk on ice, where I got to watch every single type of thing I say. And then people are like, well, you should have been raised different. Well, I wasn't. And also, if I was raised like you were raised, I wanted to survive. So, you know what I mean? We can't speak to that type of shit because we live different realities. You know what I mean? And so I think,
I don't want to live in some fucking liberal hellscape like that, like fucking Demolition Man, dude.
I was going to say, it always reminds me of Demolition Man. It reminds me of what was the city called? Los something. It was like Los Angeles, but it was named something different. But like I was like, bro, like, and they have a little water hose that come up and like wipe away the graffiti. But no, it does seem like a hellscape to me too. I'll be real with you. It's like, I don't want to move like that. I want to move in a space that really has actual more compassion, understanding, and more accepting of people the way they are. And if someone's just disrespectful, either talk to them clearly, or maybe a little roasting's fine. You know what I mean? Just trying to like, yo, this is not really socially acceptable, so we're gonna make fun of you for it, but we're not gonna ice you out or stuff like that. And I'm not saying that's the expectation people should have to have, but I also think about like what are we really doing, right? Because when we see about like people who are going to show more care and hold up their community should not be iced out because they don't talk right, right? And people who are destructive to their community and cause a lot of harm should have that harm overlooked because they do. And that's what I
Mhm.
see happen over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And people only want to be on that politic when it's convenient too. Because when I'm like, let's not promote like people using incarceration system and slavery and sexual assault as a weapon against people by using the police, then then that's problematic to people. But which is actually wild because it's like one of the most material oppressions that are existing right now. You know what I mean? Like literally slavery right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
They're literally the social force that is. They are the social force that maintains the hegemony. Like, what? Like, what? Why are you fucking like? Yeah, I'm not trying to like try and shame somebody who had no other choice in a situation, or like they got something stolen and insurance is like, you gotta fucking call the police. What? I don't, no, I'm not talking about that. But like, fuck, we shouldn't be glorifying this shit. Jesus Christ. Fuck.
oh, hold up. This is a good comment. The bigotry is deeper than language, although language is nuanced and often needs context. That was fire comment, by the way, and that's 100%. That's a buck. You know what I mean? I think one of the things that we got to think about though is like, are we really playing into colonialism when we're trying to fight oppression, right? So I think that's one thing is Idpol really does. It plays into colonialism. It plays into the hands of those folks who are causing the oppression, and I think that's a problem. I mean, I don't think it is a problem. Like, I think when we look at exactly what's happened with Idpol and civility politics, we got to see like who is the beneficiaries, which is segment part 3, and this might actually be a little shorter than we planned. I don't know who, we'll see, or we might go on a long rant, we'll see. So the beneficiaries are the people who have the most power, right? The people who first off are used to being very choicey about how they say words, because that is 100% necessary already in business, already within capitalism, already within the constructs of the Western society. And I think when we see who benefits most off of it, we see that be the people who already uphold power and who's like, I mean, like also when they when they fuck up and say something they shouldn't have said, who's the most likely to be forgiven for it? People with power. Right, and when you see someone who is super marginalized, if they say something wrong or how does the world react to them versus to the people in power? And I think there's really interesting thing to think about is like who is actually benefiting from the culture of PC politics and civility politics. Is it, like I said, is it the people? Hell,
the white liberal power structure. Like there's no question about it. It's like the neoliberal ruling order. Because ultimately, like neoliberal Idpol kind of tries to flatten all the differences. And so rather than like, looking at all these interlocking systems that maintain these different power differentials in various ways, it kind of flattens them all to the same thing. So like a white person being racist, outwardly, explicitly racist, saying some bigoted things to a black person, for example, gets equated the same way as like a poor person talking smack to a rich person, because they're being classist, they're being richist or whatever. It's like it's the same kind of thing. It flattens all of these power differentials, all these weird ups and downs and different positionalities between us. And it tries to flatten it, make it the same thing. It's just naughty words. There's no power. There's no talking about material resources. There's never a talk of like, why do certain groups have very low amount of material resources and others don't? Well, no, it's just the problem is when people are saying naughty things to each other. And so ultimately that's only going to help out the rich white liberals who are at the top of that system, and they go, oh, well, I know all the, I went to Yale, I went to the Ivies or whatever, because they're rich fucks. And they know all the words. So they're never going to have a problem. even though ultimately what they are doing is they are the beneficiaries of a system that exploits all the rest of us in varying ways to varying degrees. And so Idpol flattens that. Whereas when we actually have interactions in like a social space and somebody says something, most of the time you actually have conversation, because ultimately Idpol tries to flatten everything, and we have to recognize that you can't flatten the world. There's all these varying differences. Because of these different class layers, some of us are positioned up here versus somebody else, but then down here versus somebody else. We have to acknowledge those differences to be able to break through this condition of class society, and ultimately who benefits from us continuing to be just, oh, it's all the same, naughty words. Yeah. Fucking Neil.
I mean, like, it reminds me of, like I was going to do earlier, Thomas Macaulay was the dude I was trying to think of, who he had spoken on specifically how in India they wanted to have academia and specifically so they can have people within India who are Indian in blood, Indian in genetics and appearance, but can be the voice and the culture of the Europeans, think and operate within that function. And that's kind of what we have with not just Idpol, but the way academics and civil society tends to think is really creating that infrastructure. It's creating that way of moving. And also shout out to my video that will be hopefully coming out this week. I know I said last week too, but on motherfucking They Clone Tyrone, which will have references to Thomas Macaulay in more detail. But though that functioning of civil society is a control mechanism shaped by them, and like I said, the people who are elite, the beneficiaries, already know how to communicate that way because they already do, because like their churches were like that. They're like golf. What is it called? Not golf courses, but like there's some not summer clubs. What are they called? The summer clubs.
Country clubs.
Country clubs. Yeah, thank you. Their country clubs were already function like that. That's how they function. And the thing is that us mimicking that in a way to be liberatory is never going to produce that, because those people were always on that, whatever was socially acceptable at the given time, while they did genocidal wild stuff, and while they utilized their position and being able to speak in these specific type of ways to then also accumulate power even more so. And also we see the professionals and the academics being also another component, who are like the gatekeepers, who are the people who vet people into the system in the first place. And so when they replicate those thought processes, they're replicating not those of the oppressed liberating themselves, but instead of the overclass or the elites in the way they mimic and function. Because if you even at all like looked into the Panthers, oh my God, were they clunky about some shit they were speaking about, but they spoke to the people. They spoke to the working class. Like if you talk about like how like UEP Newton, for example, spoke about solidarity with queer folks, you'd be like, oh my God, it's so cringe. But they were literally like more on that than anybody else at that given time. And yes, were they perfect? No, they weren't. They were in the fucking 60s. They were the best they had at the given time, and we need to be better than that. That being said, like the fact was that they were on it, and it still sounded cringe because they were still clumsy. Versus if there were people who were out and out transphobes, and homophobes openly that picked their words a little more carefully, in the way it moved. So like, who was it really? Was that really benefiting? Now the Panthers, again, weren't popular at first, so that was they earned it through their merits. You know what I mean? They earned their popularity through their merits, despite not having a lot of love at first. But that's just one example, and I think there's many other examples of that. You know what I mean?
I think, but specifically, the Panthers were clumsy at the beginning, in the way you're talking about the way that they spoke, because they were a genuine social movement that was trying to genuinely start conversations and organize with other social movements. Like they were, they were trying to they were doing organizing with the what were they, the Young Patriots, different organizations. They were trying to reach out to different groups. And yeah, the way they spoke, it's like for the most part, they were talking to groups of people who they didn't really have much experience communicating together with. So of course it's going to be clunky, but they were actually making those material efforts to do that, to be part of that mutual movement. And so of course it's going to be clunky. But when you're not trying to actually demolish any of these social relations, and you're just trying to like benefit from it, it's a lot easier just to be like, say all the right words, do all the right things, you know. But, you know, ultimately we look at some of those things like you're talking about. It is cringy in hindsight, looking at some of those things from the 60s the Panthers are putting out. You're like, oh God, man, that's not going to get remembered very well later on, you know. But they were like, we can look at the trajectory that a lot of the Panthers took in their lives. And yeah, a lot of them became reformists too. But then you also have like, you know, a lot of other people who definitely did not become reformists.
What's up, Mark? Oh, yeah.
Oh.
So shout out to Mark Cook, by the way, who was a Black Panther and was in the George Jackson Brigade and did 20 years for the movement, and is one of the elders from Seattle. So what's up, Mark? Yeah, no, I mean, I think when we see about the beneficiaries specifically, we just gotta be honest about it, because like even in the social structures now, when we see like people who are lower on the social stratus actually can be canceled, and those who at the top cannot be, right? There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. That's not unintentional. You know what I mean? But also, like, I think we got to ask ourselves too, do we want to walk on ice all the time? Because I know I don't. That doesn't mean I want to be some bigot. No, if I'm being a dickhead for real, let me know. Like, I'm not trying to do that. If I'm being a dickhead because of your privilege, I'm not sorry. But if I'm up in my ways of being privileged and like whatever, and I'm being a dickhead, just talk to me. Like, just tell me. I mean, you don't have to. You don't like me, you don't fuck with me, you don't want to talk to me about it. Cool, you don't have to. But I care about how I impact people, right? And I think that's really more important than trying to like make all these rules that people have to jump through. Caring about how we impact people, and caring also is really important instead of just caring about how they impact us. You know what I mean? Because I think that's a big thing too right now with identity politics. Everybody caring about how they impact us versus how we impact them. You know what I mean? And again, this does not apply to bigots. So don't start having to have a conversation. You know what? Don't even talk to Nazis. Beat up Nazis.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't say that. No, in GTA, y'all. GTA. Algorithm in GTA. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty sad in the year of YouTube in 2023, year of our YouTube. The Nazis are under more protection than in the 30s and 40s, dude. It's pretty wild, dude. It's pretty wild. Yeah. But no, I feel you.
No lie, man. They'll TOS you for anything, bro. Especially if it's. Hey, it's always funny too, because I'll be real with you with social media stuff. Social media. A little tangent, y'all, but with social media stuff, if you black, brown, at all, they're gonna TOS you for anything. But my God, actual Nazis. Fuck no. They not getting TOS. They have to go buck wild to get TOS'd. Period. Mm-hmm. They have to just be like literally, you know what I mean? But hey, that's what happens under white supremacy.
Yeah, because ultimately they aren't a threat to this system. Facts. They are just one of the extreme forms this system can take. When it's under attack and when it feels threatened. And so ultimately, yeah, you're never going to see like until they really start being like, you're really making actionable threat, like, but even then, man, like, come on, they hardly give a shit about it. But we shouldn't be surprised, those Nazis just want to reinforce and strengthen this class society. So of course it's going to benefit the people at the top, and for anybody who's trying to attack the foundations of this class society, we're not going to get much support, but at least not from the institutions that are part of and kept going by this class society, So it's like, yeah, we can't expect them to do anything different in that sense,
Yeah, man, it's put on the list, but I also want to touch a little bit on the culture war, just because feel like that should have been on the segments anyways before, and then we could do some shout outs and stuff, and then like go ahead and like close out. But I think also we should think about the culture war, which I feel like ties into identity politics super hard. And who has it benefited? Because
Yeah.
one thing I will be like, it hasn't benefited not even liberals. It hasn't benefited liberals. It definitely hasn't benefited the left, the actual left. But who grew? Who grew in power because of the culture wars? And it'd be like, well, it was the, right. I mean, they're both right, but it was the right. It was like right of right. It was like the manosphere. It was the fascist, the racist. Like I've seen more racist shit on social media than I see nowadays since that shit really popped off, right? And a part of that is it was sparked by their reaction to having Obama, but it's just gotten worse.
Yeah.
As social media grew, as we reacted, as we added into that fruitless battle. And I'm a big person like, don't fight fruitless wars.
Yeah.
I'm like, if it's a fruitless war, that's not where we got to fight them at then, because it's just going to keep us distracted. And they have a trick of being able to use that to fuel them. And we, as fortunately, at least media-wise, have not learned to do that very well. You know what I mean? Where we could really have the same amount of fueling off of that. And I think that's partly because of the civility, honestly. Because people like, I mean, if you just double down on that shit, then it'd be a little different. Like I think people will get it, but people don't do that. You know what I mean? I don't know, but maybe I'm just tripping. But the thing is,
no, you're totally on that, because like really the right, they don't have to break the rules of this society to like go along with, but like ultimately to take certain arguments to their logical conclusion, those on the left or whatever liberatory movements have to break with many of the kind of presumed orthodox positions of the society. And so, that breaking with civility can be really hard for people, because it's almost, it's like, how do you explain to a fish what water is? That's just the world they swim in. It's everywhere. It's everything. It's what they breathe. It's what it's everything. And so, it's the same kind of thing. We're brought up in these liberal precepts to the point where like I call everybody liberals, and it's because, we got social liberals in the Democrats trying to police everybody based on what they talk about. And then you got the fucking classical liberals who are like trying to redefine the polis to be just white landowning males again, And I'm not saying that there aren't any differences within that group, but ultimately they're fighting over the course of liberalism. They are fighting over the heart and soul of liberalism. Does liberalism mean a world where everyone has voting rights and everyone equally gets to this table that's rickety on one side, and is like all the stuff up here where we're sitting is going straight down to the people of the rich side that have all the weight on the table, that's not an even table to be all coming to the table, whereas like the right is trying to argue that they want to just go back to classical liberalism of 150 years ago, 200 years ago, And, but ultimately we're not in that conversation because our dreams and desires are far greater than, And so that's just an argument with the liberals. And that's why it becomes so hard for the left to meaningfully engage with that culture war, because ultimately that culture war is designed to just keep people so distracted and fighting amongst themselves that all they think is possible is just voting every couple of years and doing the revolving door,
Let's be real, we're not even in the conversation or a part of it anyways, because like the people who are called leftists that are engaging in that, like politically they're really like at best centrists, right? They might be left-leaning centrists, but they're down that center fucking line. They're like, barely, maybe marginally lefter than Bernie, who was again a centrist. Like it'd be like, no, he was left. No, he wasn't a leftist. He was like, I mean, I'll consider left at least. The little bars on that section, that area is the center of the fucking map, right? You can say you have to drop exactly on the line. Doesn't make sense to me because I view it as a gradient, right? And so it's like you can be like centrist is that whole gradient switch over to left, and then you start to become leftist. So for me, Bernie was very much a centrist because he's right there in the center of the fucking grid, right? So it's like, and I'd argue that most so-called left, or at least online and notoriety of people are really centrist. They might be left-leaning centrists,
Yep.
but still centrist. You know what I mean? And
They
versus
have to
like
be-
you get me or you who fall off the left lower corner of the box. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
We're like not we're past where the box would end. You know what I mean? This was kind of like
Well, it's kind of hard. Like people call me. It's funny when people call me a liberal, and I'm like, motherfucker, I've got like more solid critiques of the left than you motherfuckers do. Don't even call me that shit. Like, yeah, you know,
like. And yeah, this thing is that kills me too, because when people are critiquing about the left and critiquing what amounts to left-leaning centrist, and I'm like, bruh, no. Like, I mean, there's critiques to the left, don't get it wrong. There's hella, you hear it all the time. Where do you think Tanky came from? Like, you know what I mean? Where do you think, like, I don't know. I don't even know any this is for anarchists, really. All I hear is anarchy, but that seems like that's a social media thing. I don't really feel like that's a real one. I mean, people just call it. People say anarchists. With this anarchists, they just call us anarchists derogatorily. You know what I mean? That's really how they just do it. Like fucking anarchists. You know what I mean?
Hell yeah, fucking anarchists. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I love hearing bastards complaining about the fucking anarchists. That shit's great. We did a good job then.
Man, and so yeah, I mean, but yeah, I think, and so we fall outside the culture war because it just seems ridiculous. It seems ridiculous. Like it looks like some clown shit. You know what I mean? And in our history, clowns haven't turned out to be very good. I'm just saying.
Oh God.
we won't go into that right now. Another time.
That deserves a whole lot more time. Oh geez.
Y'all don't get the references right there yet. We will someday, but yeah, we've had bad experience with clowns. Okay. but no, I mean, to be real, like it seems unproductive, and I'm not gonna say I haven't engaged in it with somewhat because I need clicks, bro. But like also I try to talk about other stuff mainly when I engage with it. I'll like hit on it, but then I'll go into the more deeper conversations, in my opinion, where things talk about material consequences of specific things versus like this asshole said this. You know what I mean? Like I was gonna make one on TYT and like their transphobic rant. I was like, you know what, this is dumb. I'm gonna make a joke about it in my next one about Tyrone, about how like I was gonna talk about it, but actually nah. Because the thing is, it's like it's dumb. Like, yeah, she transphobic. We know this. Anna transphobic. TYT's been problematic. Who cares? Like because they're a joke. They're not real. They don't really have any influence in a real way. They have influence in the YouTube communities, but they don't have influence in the actual problems that are going on. They're just being they're profiting off being dickheads. That's how I view it. And I think when we see that, we got to ask, okay, well, so who is profiting on the material consequences that we see? Oh, people don't like that, but oh well. Who is profiting off the material consequences of what we see, right? And then we got to address that. We got to attack that, and then we just take the clowns to be clowns. They clowns. TYT are clowns. Okay, boom, whatever. You know what I mean? And I get it sucks. Having clowns have those big platforms suck. Trust me, I feel that way all the time. I understand.
Just remember it this way. Just think about it this way. If they were not such a fucking clown, this class society, this empire would not would not allow them to be in such a powerful position. They wouldn't. The only people who get to these fucking powerful positions in society allowed to be able to put are people who play ball. It's just, people who play ball. And the Young Turks, they've always been fucking millionaires living in LA, being like, oh, the homeless, they're lowering my property values. Yeah, fuck them. Like, I'm just not surprised that they're also transphobic and all, like, let's go down the list. Like, it's not surprising. They're lit. They care about their money. That's it.
Yeah.
They want to
value. Homeless people are a hindrance to them, all that type of stuff, and it's just crazy. This is wild. This is wild, bro. Like, nah, man. But the thing is, like, that's why I also didn't like I ended up not doing it because I couldn't focus on something more meaningful from that. I'd just be talking about how TYT has always sucked, I was like, you know what? I'm not making that video anymore because I
Yeah.
don't want to do that. Like, there are just some people that don't really matter and are irrelevant overall. I wish I had the number of platform they did. I'd use it way better than they do for way better causes. But it is what it is. You know what I mean? So I'm not gonna lie. I'm jealous of their size, of their platform, but I'm not jealous. I would never want to be them. To be clear. That being said, I do think I should want to. Do you got any last on this little piece, and then maybe we can like close out with letting know about some upcoming events. Oh,
I'm good. Yeah. Let's get with shout out.
Say again.
I just said let's get with those shout outs. Let folks know.
All right. So coming on the 31st at 5 p.m. Eastern, and you can go on my community tab and see this. I got a flyer there, and it's got a link in the comment section where FTP is having an event on the 31st, like at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Specific, where we're going to do a training on phone zaps and how to do phone zaps to make a difference. Things we have done with those phone zaps, by the way, is we've forced prisons to evacuate during disasters. We've been able to help put pressure to stop executions where we successfully did. So those are some of the examples of things we've done with these phone zaps. And so, yes, please, if you feel like you want to get involved, it is a perfect time to jump in. It's a perfect way to go and be able to get involved. If you don't feel like you can leave your house for whatever reason, you feel like we're COVID, that's the way you can get involved, because you can also become part of our ZAP team, our disaster response team, and we will like do the phone zaps to push them to evacuate. We don't always get W's, but we have got W's as far as that's happened. So be out there, be clear. And we also teach y'all how to be able to do it yourself for causes that you feel like you need to do. You know, how you go about doing that, and because it's really important to be able to like weaponize even the simplest things to be able to help our community. You know what I mean? So,
because I want to say about phone zaps in particular, like phone zaps by itself is not a revolutionary or a reformist strategy. It could be used for both, but as part of a revolutionary strategy, gumming up the phone banks of our oppositional institutions is a good thing. You know, putting those forms of pressure on those people can be really successful. You know, we think about it like these institutions as just these faceless monoliths. But no, there's phones and there's people who have to answer those phones. And after the 50th call, they are just as annoyed by hearing about that shit as you would be. So, you know, and as with a phone zap, if you get enough people, you individually only need to call them once. But they hear from all 50 or 100 of you and they don't like it, you know? So, you know, never discount those little things. They seem like they're little, you know, they seem like how would this ever have the ability to change something? But if it's part of a broader strategy, you know, it can also get people in something like that. They might not be able to leave their house. You know, you were talking about a little bit earlier, you can't leave your house, you know, different things. You don't have the time, you're raising kids, you got your, you know, health issues and whatever. Like that's a way that you can take part in things, you know, and know that like,
and even if you can leave your house, also you can also still be adding support to something that's outside of somewhere you can travel to. You feel me? Yeah, it's extremely freaking crucial. It makes a big impact. Also, everybody's heard of the Black Bloc as far as protests, but someone told me about a Black Bloc strategy as far as phone zaps, where you get their fax number and you use black pieces of paper and you just fax them black pieces of paper. And
their ink, dude, their ink just like out of there, dude. They got to replace that shit hella quick, dude. Mwah.
Also a good tactic. Or if you really wanted to be wild with it, you could take and print a message with in white on a black piece of paper, and then you get the message through. But a bunch of those, you know what I mean? You know, you get the message through, and they use other ink. So yeah. So I just throwing that out there. There's ways to affect them specifically, materially, and there's ways like just the phone zap in general to put pressure on them and let them know they're being watched specifically, because a lot of things that this government does, especially the things like leaving people in disaster zones to die, they don't want people seeing or knowing or thinking about. You know, except when Trump's going to jail, then they point out all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, keep pointing it out. All this stuff that's effed up has been happening in jails and prisons the whole time. Keep pointing that out. Yeah, it's been bad like that. across the country. Like not just that one prison jail that Trump might go to, but that's just jail conditions in general. Like just is. So yeah. Rainbow faxes would be nice for a modern take. Okay.
And if they have color faxes, dude, that color ink is way more expensive. Let's go, rainbows! Hell yeah, I'm down for that one.
So yeah, again, it's on the community tab. Let's see. Actually, let me go pull this link up real quick. I'll drop it in the chat. Give me 1 second to go ahead and handle that. Yeah. So I mean, I think one of the things that's great about phones apps, like I said, is no matter what your condition is, if you have a phone, you can make it happen. You know what I mean? And it's super useful. It has effect. I know it seems like it wouldn't. It really does seem like, what is this really going to do? But they full on evacuated prisons. They full on called off people's execution. It's worked. It has worked.
Because if you clog up their phone line, they can't do any official business on those phones. All the people that are trying to call them for official business, all they hear is a busy signal. So it really does. Like, the more you can gum up that phone line, the more of an inconvenience it is for them, the more they have to put actual work back on hold. And remember what their actual work consists of. You know, it's bullshit. So it's great that they're not working. Stop that shit.
Bet. And like, look, right now I'm dropping the link in the chat. So if you want to RSVP to the Phones app training, you can do it right now or later. To drop the link right now. And you can go sign up and it'd be great. If y'all did, and I think y'all like it and learn some stuff, it'd be cool. But yeah, and also like get back to what Jelly was saying. Yeah, just being oppositional does way more than you think it is. Clogging stuff up. Like I said, how we stopped the most expensive proposed freaking police facility was literally clogging up. We went to the city council every day and wouldn't let them spend no money on anything. We just stopped them from being able to pass anything. And you know what they did? They said that precinct got to go because we got other things we want to pass. And these corporate people who are paying our bills are getting very unhappy that we're not able to pass these things. So just clogging it up goes a long, long way. And yeah, also, if y'all haven't had the time, subscribe, hit that bell, share this video, share the stream, let everybody know about it. Let them know it's every Monday. Probably gonna be 4:30 instead of 4, just because I have an ongoing meeting for this fundraiser for a comrade who's inside. We're organizing, so keep your eye out for that as well. And also keep an eye out for hopefully this week or the video on who cloned Tyrone. So thanks for rocking with us. You got any last thing to say, Jelly?
Spread anarchy, live communism. Let's go.
All right. So it was good rocking with y'all. We about to end it right about now. I'm gonna end it, and I'll catch y'all later.